We're two college professors. We just saw Alien Romulus in the theater, and here's what we thought.
Are you sure you want to do this?
It's the Yukon Popcast. I'm Professor Stephen Dyson.
And I'm Professor Jeff Dudas.
And Jeff, we are literally just out of the theater, fresh and hot out of the theater. And what have we seen?
We saw Alien Romulus.
Alien Romulus, the new iteration in a long-running franchise, in many ways marketed as a sort of reboot as a franchise, a return to both the time period of the best known movies and the most well-regarded movies of that franchise, Alien and Aliens, and an attempt to return to that form of storytelling. So in this video, we're going to tell you what we thought of the movie. We're going to talk a little bit about the plot, explain some elements of it, to the best of our understanding that might be a bit confusing, set it in a wider context, and do a kind of thematic analysis. In particular, talk about themes that have been established in Alien and Aliens and the degree to which they are taken up or extended by the new movie Alien Romulus. First of all, though, Jeff, I think we should do a temperature check. I should say before we say anything further, we have not discussed this movie at all.
Yep.
We're straight out the theater. We came back here to Popcast Towers, and we have no idea really what the other person sat next to each other in the movie, but no idea what the other person thought of the movie. I'm actually super, super excited to find out what your thoughts are on this movie in terms of, did you like it?
I thought it was entertaining enough. I wouldn't say that I thought that it was especially groundbreakingly good. I don't anticipate watching it again, but I thought that it was interesting enough. It was entertaining enough. I'm not sure if I thought it was entertaining enough because it was a little predictable in its story beats. And I guess I don't know if I feel like it was a little predictable in story beats because they were sort of hackneyed and cliched plot points, or if they were consistent with these earlier two Alien films. But there are a lot of, horror movie elements, I thought, including the ending, which we'll talk about, that made it feel like not just an Alien movie or an Aliens movie, but also one that was pitched towards a kind of maybe more highbrow horror audience as well. What about you? What did you think of it?
Okay, so I have very conflicted feelings about this. And I think, by way of context, I know this franchise a little more than you. I sort of regularly screen for my classes and watch and analyze both Alien in particular and Aliens, and I'm familiar with the rest of the movies in the series. I know you had watched Alien a few times and had to actually go and rewatch Aliens and found it a kind of fresh experience and haven't watched any of the other movies.
Right.
So I don't know if that conditions what I'm going to say. Taken as a movie, I thought what you thought. And entertaining enough, some interesting kind of things to talk about, lots to dig into. Taken as what I believe it was marketed as, a return to not only the time period, but some of the ambitions and forms of storytelling of Alien and Aliens, I'm very disappointed.
Yeah.
I think it has a very difficult task that very few movies are able to accomplish when they try and do this task, which is to take a set of original ideas. The kind of defining template for this franchise is obviously Ridley Scott's Alien, and try and do something really interesting with them, especially a long time after the initial movie. There are a lot of difficulties in doing that. James Cameron had sidestepped that difficulty by simply changing the genre of movie and actually making a really good but fundamentally different movie that references, although and fundamentally transforms the first movie. There are very few movies that have successfully pulled off what Alien Romulus has tried. I'd say Blade Runner 2049 is one. I'd say like Top Gun Maverick is one. I think Alien Romulus falls into one of the pitfalls you can find when you try and do this, which is fan service.
Yeah.
So I would say in terms of quality or in terms of the degree to which it meets its ambition, let me see if you can follow this. Alien Romulus is to Alien as Star Wars The Force Awakens is to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right? In that it is in several ways a sort of shot-for-shot reboot of famous scenes from Alien and Aliens that risks tipping over into like fan service. People are expecting the person to say the thing and then everyone cheers and the person shows up. And that's fundamentally different from something like Blade Runner 2049, which I think meaningfully extends the original movie while still referencing it and tying it into the mythology, or Top Gun Maverick, or in a different way, aliens to Alien.
There are some stylistic elements, and maybe this is where the throwback or the attempt to recapture the original vibes of the first two movies is most successful. The opening shots, really, the opening scenes we see are taken straight out of both Alien and Aliens. The wide scope of outer space, and then the sort of gradual appearance of the spacecraft, then the moving in on the spacecraft, in which we find that it's a kind of abandoned or empty, or seemingly abandoned or empty spacecraft, but in fact it consists of people who are in various stages of hibernation. All of that appears.
Yeah, I agree. In the same way as Star Wars: The Force Awakens does a lot of the same things, and even in this new in Alien Romulus, kind of the font that introduces the movie is the same as it is in Alien. I would say that aesthetically it's beautiful. That's a real strength of the movie. It looks a lot like Alien, but in a sort of way that contemporary audiences are going to buy, right? It looks like that same world, but shot with cameras and technology from today. That's all very good, and so aesthetically it's very interesting. The danger is a sort of, like I said, fan service, and at times, there's one too many Easter eggs. There's one too many, like, oh look, it's she's wearing Reebok trainers, which is a very famous shot from Aliens. Why is she wearing space Reeboks? And then the camera pans and she's wearing Reeboks.
57 years in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Or there's the little thing that goes up and down that's on the spaceship at Alien, the little kind of nodding rooster. And there's just kind of one too many. Honk honk moments where you're like, see, we're paying homage to the old movie, and at times I did sort of wonder how much in control of all those references the writers and the director were. The director Fede Alvarez, which is significant because his previous movie that he's well known for was called Don't Breathe, which was a movie about a group of teens who think it's going to be very easy to rob a house where a blind old man lives. And it turns out the blind old man is actually a very muscular and hyper kind of sensor, has really good other senses rather than his sight, and is sort of murderous as well. And he picks them off one by one. Well, that sounds familiar.
Very familiar.
Right. So I think Fede Alvarez is, this is kind of Alien Don't Breathe in some senses. There's times I'm not sure he's in control of the mythos or the references. He has, they bring back the AI from Alien. I'd literally bring him back in. I presume it's obviously a digital recreation of Ian Holm, who plays Ash in the original Alien. But he's the damage that he's sustained is the damage that Bishop in the second movie sustained. Yeah. I mean, Ash didn't. That wasn't what Ash looked like. Ash was burned up. That's not Ash. And the AI in Alien Romulus is called Rook. Yeah. Which is like Bishop, right? They're both chess pieces. But Bishop that wasn't a class of AI name for chess pieces. There was a Mr. Bishop. And Ash isn't a chess piece, and that's who you're trying to reference. Yeah. So I don't mean to get too much in the weeds here, but it's like, yeah, I've watched all these things. I wrote down all the things I liked, and I slightly jumbled them all up, and here's a movie that... Yeah.
And it's perhaps relevant that at the theater, when we were leaving the theater after the movie's over, I noticed, and you did as well, another patron who was wearing a T-shirt that referenced the name of the fictional company.
Yeah, Whale & Utah.
And so there clearly is some significant fan base here, to which this kind of fan service would appear
absolutely.
To be.
And this is,
appropriate.
I think we might move on from temperature check in just a second. So we're giving our thoughts. I would have been really interested to know what that guy thought of the movie, and what.
Seemed pretty happy.
I've tried to avoid reviews, but I did see like the Rotten Tomato aggregator score, which is like 86. That seems high to me. So I'd like to know what other people are thinking if I'm just way off base. But
let me put it this way, and then we'll move on. I think that the things that struck you and disappointed you about this movie, all of these little ham-handedly planted Easter eggs, for example, someone with a much less vision and understanding of the franchise, such as myself, I didn't get any of those. And so I'm wondering if this is a movie that attempts to have it both ways. And in that way, maybe it's not a great analogy to Star Wars: The Force Awakens, because that fan base is just so much larger.
Yeah, maybe that's it. So this is what, yes, and this, you've perfectly queued up a point I wanted to make, which is, I don't understand who this movie is for. Like, I don't understand who the intended audience is, right? It's the protagonists in the movie are substantially younger than the protagonists in Alien and Aliens, where in Alien they're famously kind of space truckers, and in Aliens they're colonial marines. The protagonists in this movie they seem to me to be teenagers, like early 20s, like they're significantly younger, and just kind of a group of friends who go on like a sort of adventure. And the movie seems to me to be made for that audience, and that's great. But that is an audience that has a set of expectations and generally a filmic history about what's going to happen in this kind of movie, right? There's going to be sort of jump scares, that it's going to move with a certain propulsive force. There's going to be a certain pacing of the cutting and the cuts and so forth. Those are not the ways that certainly Alien and even Aliens, which was supposed to be an action movie, were put together. Aliens, this sort of famously high octane action movie, is much, much slower than Alien Romulus, which really is like boom, 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 but like there's always something going on. It's bigger and crazier, and that's an expectation, I think, of I don't want to sound patronizing here. It's not a bad thing. It's just a type of movie that you might expect if you're in the age demographic portrayed by the protagonist. But then all the people who would like the Easter eggs are all the people that are sort of my age. Yeah. And the people who are going saying this is generic horror movie, all of this is going to go over their heads. They're going to say, who is this Ash guy that they've brought back? Why is there some weird old guy that they've CGI'd onto the screen? That only makes sense if you've consumed and you're kind of marinated in those early movies. So I don't quite know who is being targeted here. I mean, ideally, you'd want both audiences.
Well, maybe let's dig into the plot.
Okay.
Maybe that'll help us puzzle this through.
Good idea. So we thought we would do a couple of things here. We'd talk briefly about a plot summary just to orient actually ourselves, because we'd just come out of the theater. Then talk about some of the movie themes, and then maybe the ending. So in terms of a plot summary, how do you want to start to frame things?
So it's taking place on a colony off Earth that appears to be a long ways away. And it appears to be a colony that is mostly a mining colony, and one that is governed by, for all intents and purposes, if informally, by this corporation, right? The Weyland-Yutani. And we immediately get the sense that we're immediately introduced to our protagonist, whose name is Ray.
Ray's from Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
And she has a kind of a brother who is a synthetic human, or as they like to call it, an artificial person, which is also a throwback to an earlier line from Aliens. And the movie begins with Rain having fulfilled the terms of her contract and having the terms of that contract summarily changed by a bureaucrat, literally behind a glass partition. And that kind of sets the action into motion.
Yeah. So here maybe we'll actually wend the themes into the plot when they kind of come up. Here is a classic theme of Alien and Aliens, of those movies, which is the kind of evil corporation, Weyland-Yutani, and it's tied up with themes of sort of capitalism and exploitation, themes of class, and themes of colonialism. It's an explicitly colonialistic enterprise that's engaged in terraforming and other things. And you're right, the mining colony is, a sort of inhospitable place that's not very desirable. And they seem to have, these people are not just on contracts, which they were in Alien, right? They seem to be subjected to a form of indentured servitude. Yes. This is interesting to me, because one argument I'd make about this movie is that many of the themes of Alien and Aliens are hit in this movie, but they're hit in a just harder, right? Like more on the nose, or in a I hate to be negative, but a crasser fashion, right? Weyland-Yutani is an evil capitalist corporation. But they're not deal in indentured servitude, right?
Yeah, it's
I
a
hadn't
throwback.
understood them to have done that.
It strikes me as a throwback to 19th and early 20th century American involvement, United States involvement in Latin America.
Yeah.
In which you had these major American corporations that were effectively governments in and of themselves, right? They and so they ended up in these formal and informal partnerships and affiliations with the actual governing body. But they exercise something like very much what we see on screen with Whalen Yutani, is that it and the people who were subject to that informal rule very much found themselves in an indentured servant or even slave-like relationship.
Yeah. I got the sense from the other movies, maybe I'm the one who's misreading it, that the company was a little more subtle. I don't think they were any less evil, but a little more subtle and a little more concerned with keeping things like secret and doing them on the DL. Like in this movie, literally the worker fulfills the term of their contract. Yep. And instantly the contract is doubled, and this has been done by no notice, and that's a crucial plot point, right? The form of dispute with the company in the first movie was, are we going to get extra hazard pay for responding to this distress?
But I think this is worth digging in for just a second, Lynn, because this is the first of those three movies that presents the workforce as an away force, a colonized force, essentially, which we don't really see in. I mean, it's very much earthbound, right? The terms of employment are very much earthbound.
There's a set of cutscenes from Aliens, like there's an extended version in which you do see a kind of colony. You see the colony of Hadley's Hope with Whalen Yutani employees. But it is slightly different in that they're explicitly just there on, they're there on terraforming, and they also go kind of wildcatting. And that's not, if you watched the theatrical release of Aliens, you might have missed that.
But I think what we get here is we get a scenario in which there's no meaningful governing authority on this colony except for Whalen Yutani. Right. And so there's no oversight here to this authority, which... Again, I do think there are historical analogs to this. Now, it may grate uncomfortably within the universe of Alien, but it certainly has resonances that feel familiar to our world.
No, I agree. The point I'm making is not that the movie abandons the themes that were established in Alien and Aliens. If I was to make a critique, and I don't mean to sound wholly negative here. I mean, I like the movie taken on its own terms. I'm just trying to speak to it in relation to two of, admittedly, the most revered movies of contemporary cinema. So it's obviously going to struggle in that comparison. I think some of the themes are hit in a less subtle fashion.
But I hear you, but I still... My response to that would be yes, but these corporations behaved differently in their home countries and in colonies. Okay. So to me, that's perfectly plausible that Whalen Yutani would have a more subtle form of coercion, a more subtle form of authority and domination that it exercised in this case on Earth, in its home world, than it would when separated from those lines of oversight. And so you're dealing with a kind of a powerless group of people here who really don't have any resort to any kind of, there's no one to go to complain about Whalen Yutani's behavior here. Right. And so we're immediately put in this situation where the only way out is to try to concoct this, far-fetched plan.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good point. I take that on board. Far-fetched plan off-world, group of friends. They're all kind of the same age. It's here. They get together.
Difficult to follow, and I should say some of this was the experience. I think we talked about a little bit of being in the theater. We both had a very difficult time catching the dialogue.
It was hard,
particularly early in the movie, and so when there was the introduction scene of Rain and Andy with this kind of larger group of friends, it was clear that there was some context that was revealed in dialogue. I couldn't quite catch it.
They had sharp banter. What that banter actually was, and I don't know if this is a problem in the cinema we were in, the theater we were in, or if it's a general kind of movie mixing problem, but there was a lot of like muffled, and use of slang by British people, and I'm British, and even I was kind of struggling with this. But these young people seem to be a kind of group of friends. They kind of decide one night, maybe we could just take one of these spaceships and something has floated into orbit, and maybe we could go up there and we could kind of pillage it for the cryo units we need to escape to our preferred better life. Here's my question. This is another reason why I knew the movie wasn't quite hitting me as I'd hoped, is in that I'm kind of thinking about the logic and plausibility of some of these things rather than just going with them. So Weyland-Yutani, as has already been established, is close to a totalitarian entity on this world, right? They can literally say, I'm sorry, we've just doubled the length of your indentured servitude. And all these young people are complaining we'll never get travel passes. We're almost literally imprisoned here, right? That's the extent of Weyland-Yutani's control. Simultaneously, you can walk outside, get in a Weyland-Yutani spaceship, fly up off the top of the planet, and no one else in Weyland-Yutani has noticed. There's a whacking great space station has floated into the neighborhood with literally Weyland-Yutani's most valuable super secret evil schemes going on. And these kids are the only ones who've seen it.
I was similarly befuddled. There are other points within the movie that puzzled me as well, but that one I did find strange. Why, if they seem to have the power to get onto this relatively modern spaceship whenever they want and leave, why? First of all, how?
Yeah,
as you say, in a
Mom, Dad, I'm just taking the car out.
In literally a company town. How does that exist? And second, why have they waited? Well, why not just leave anyway?
Well, but they need the sleeping pods, right? Because otherwise it takes 9 years to get to the place where they want to go.
But aren't there other places that are not 9 years away?
You would have thought so. Maybe they could buy some sleeping pods. I'll tell you what, steal the spacecraft, sell it, buy some sleeping pods, and off you go. But I think the bigger thing is, why is Weyland-Yutani, they lost this space station, it floated across space, and they were just like, well, no, guys, I guess
we're not going to check it out.
We're not going to send anyone else to look at it. And it turns out what's been going on this space station when they get up there is super secret alien research. And this was a point of connection to Alien, which is this Weyland-Yutani had managed to retrieve here I might get a bit fuzzy because we've literally only seen this movie once and just recently. So you tell me if you've got the same, you developed the same information from watching the movie. They retrieved parts of the Nostromo, which is the ship that's destroyed in Alien, and that gave them some information. But also they separately found the xenomorph that Ripley had blown out, floating in space, and they retrieved that as well. And the xenomorph
was visually unclear to me, but it seemed like the xenomorph was in the same area
as the wreckage of the Nostromo. Okay, that
if it was not,
but it had just been flailing around in space for 20 years, right? It had no food and no oxygen, which fine. They explained that. They said that this organism doesn't need that.
I had a hard time. So I had just rewatched Aliens, as you mentioned. And in the first act of Aliens, you definitely, first of all, it's been 57 years, we're told, that Ripley has been floating,
right?
In cryogenic sleep. And you very clearly get the sense that she is telling them these events from Alien for the first time, that they do not know about this, or at least that's what they're suggesting.
So this movie has to be hermetically sealed.
Yeah, so I don't. Right. I'm having a hard time with the timeline here. So because that suggests, right, that they have been looking for this for some time. So where exactly are we? Are we 57 years hence?
No. I think 20 years. I picked that up. We're 20 years post Alien.
Okay.
So during the 20 years, although it's not clear to me when this happened, the Weyland-Yutani retrieved the xenomorph from Alien, right?
Yeah.
They didn't retrieve Ripley. She's floated miles. She's lost. She's not going to be discovered for another 30-odd years. And they either retrieved the alien and bits of the Nostromo relatively soon after the events of Alien, in which case they were doing experiments on this spaceship for 20 years, or they retrieved it at some point in that 2-decade period. But the xenomorph was retrieved alive, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes on a rampage on the space station. But also before it's done that, I don't think it had laid eggs. I think they'd 3D printed face huggers. They'd managed to, anyways, somehow more face huggers had been produced and were being held in storage on this space station the xenomorph had wreaked havoc over the space station, so it's all messed up, and was dead. And the facehuggers, are in like cryogenic storage. And series of events. These teenagers get on the space station. They trip the series of alarms and tripwires and so forth. Facehuggers emerge. You can kind of guess the rest from there.
Yeah.
I think we should do some more kind of thematic analysis.
Yeah. I think we should take a break.
Okay.
And then come back and do the thematic analysis.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. And we are back with our instant reaction to Alien Romulus, which we just seen in the theater. In this section, I thought we'd talk about some of the themes of the movie, and in particular, we wanted to frame this by distilling some of the main themes from Alien and Aliens, and talking about the extent to which Alien Romulus kind of picks up the baton from those movies and what it does with those themes. So I wrote out, what do I have here, Jeff? I have 8 themes. I'm just going to read them out, and you can stop me when one's interesting to you, and we'll kind of chat about it. Okay. I have first, hypersleep, dream / nightmare. Seems like you're passing on that. Strong heroine.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Because what I noticed, and one of the things when I had mentioned earlier in our temperature check that the plot points felt a bit predictable. One of the ways I thought that they felt predictable was the sort of the last girl phenomenon.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a hallmark of American horror movies. But it's also a hallmark, of course, of the earlier Alien movies as well. And so there is something that, that's something that was one of the more obvious things I thought that removed this movie from this kind of sealed universe of Alien and even this universe of sci-fi and really leaned into the more horror-like elements. Is that this is the last girl, the last survivor, the heroine who's our protagonist. Everyone else is going to die, but in the end, we will have one survivor, and it will be the last girl.
So this is another challenge that movies like Alien Romulus face, is that they're often taking up themes that were originally introduced or defined by, and the paradigmatic example or original example is the original movie that they're now trying to build on. And then they return to those themes, and people say, well, that's just generic, like that's in every movie. And you're like, yes, it is, but it's an original idea to this franchise.
Yeah, I don't know in this case that it's completely original. Okay. There's a couple of others, right? In the horror genre, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the originator of that last girl film. Now, I believe those two movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Alien, are released very close to one another,
right?
In the mid 1970s. So I think there's some crossover anyway,
right?
But certainly since Alien, that is a trope that has taken on almost inevitable status.
Yeah, I think so. So I am definitely that there is always a strong heroine in any of the Alien movies. Even the really bad ones, it's kind of a necessary thing. I thought Rain was probably the most compelling character, candidly, in this movie. And they did a number of things with her character that I thought were interesting, were actually true to what Alien was. Because the thing with Ripley is she's not like Superman, right? She doesn't become implausibly kind of capable or whatever. She is from the get-go a capable, rational, sensible person. And it's not necessarily that she embodies absolutely extraordinary qualities. It's that she is a sensible person who keeps her shit together.
Yeah.
While all the men around her, that sometimes for reasons to do with the male psyche, I'll solve this problem. I'll go in the tunnel with the alien and I'll definitely bash its head. Yeah. And she's like, it's probably not a good idea.
Right.
And they don't listen, and then they die.
And they don't panic.
Yes.
In the critical moments of a decision has to be made, they don't panic.
Right.
Right. And we see that over and over again in Alien Romulus.
Right.
I mean, for example, the scene in which the three of them are moving through this lab that is infested with proto-aliens, and they have been told by Andy that they need to stay calm. They need to keep their body temperature consistent with the the outside atmosphere, because this limits the ability of the aliens to sort of sense life, I suppose. It's meaningful that it's the one who panics is the male lead and not Rain.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I thought Rain was, carried the movie very much, kept it kind of grounded, and presented a quality that Ripley had presented of being a very plausible, hyper competent, but not unrealistically. It's not a superhero franchise, right? And she kind of continues that. I had one question about her that I wanted your thoughts on, and it was just I thought a false note or something that really struck me. Much is made of her relationship with Andy, the AI, who she regards as a brother, and how she is unusually kind of caring to him because he faces the discrimination that his people typically face in this franchise. But yet at one point it's revealed that she had lied to him about a very crucial problem that he was going to have in reaching the promised land.
I was very surprised at that revelation because it seemed so deeply out of character. I
self-centered.
Presumed that the storyline would be, it was also a surprise to her.
Right.
That she had also been tricked into this, because we were certainly not given a scene that explains that in advance of us finding it out. I agree. I thought that was very odd and very out of character, very inconsistent, both with the way that she's portrayed prior to that revelation and the way that she's portrayed for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, that was very strange and actually hard to recover from in terms of keeping a coherent view of that character. Okay, good. Next theme I have written down here, see if you bite on this one. Capitalism's, duplicitous company.
Yeah, we've already.
You think we already hit that? Okay, good. AI.
Yeah, so this is a movie that definitely reprises human concerns or human visions of what artificial life is. Sometimes it hits that theme really hard, such as the sort of hot-headed brother character, I guess, whose name I can't remember, but who has a kind of a personal grudge against these artificial people because of a traumatic previous experience.
It's telling that you can't remember that guy's name.
I can't remember his name, but one thing that he makes a big deal about is that it's not a real person. Right? This is they're not real. And of course, the problem with that is that in fact Andy is real. He is real. He exists in the world. He's tangible. He is clearly capable of autonomous thought and action. And the only distinction really that we get kind of at least in this presentation of the artificial synthetic people is that when they bleed, they don't bleed red blood.
Right.
And so there is this kind of ongoing subterranean concern maybe that the movies portray about the line between humanity and artificiality and how to draw that line. Is it meaningful? And if it's meaningful, what impact are the meanings?
I agree. And this has always been a central theme in Alien and Aliens. I think it made it into Alien largely because if you made a science fiction movie in 1979, you still had to reference 2001: A Space Odyssey. So you needed a reference to HAL 9000, right? And in some ways, Ash in Alien follows a sort of relatively similar arc to HAL 9000. But the other thing that the AI did, both in those paradigmatic science fiction movies, 2001 and Alien, was the human creation of a new species of artificial intelligence was itself a commentary on humanity. Yeah. And it was set in comparison with or in contrast with the independent existence of a third species, right? So it's the monolith creators in 2001 who see that humanity can now create artificial intelligence and regard this as a sign of humanity's evolution that trips them on to the next stage. It's in the original Alien, you've got the xenomorph, these purely hostile organisms that are providing kind of a commentary. What I'm trying to say is the aliens are providing a commentary on humanity. Yeah. And the creation of artificial intelligence is one thing that is being maybe commented upon? Like, are we worthy of doing this? Are we, or maybe I'm
There's
too
also
much
a
towards.
way, and this is something I wanted to talk about maybe in a different context, but I think it's appropriate here as well, is that there's a way in which, in the end, we get the creation of a human xenoform hybrid character, which is the true nightmare.
Yeah.
Right. Turns out to be, I think, probably meant to be significantly more terrifying than the xenoform themselves, and at the same time then throws into relief these synthetic people.
Yeah. So I think this is actually the next theme I have written down. I think this is sex and the perversion thereof, reproduction and the perversion thereof. Absolutely central themes in Alien and Aliens. The facehuggers violate humans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the first movie, John Hurt's character is raped by a facehugger. There's no other way to read what's going on, and it's in many ways what was and is shocking about that movie is it's a sort of, I don't know if it is like ultimate male nightmare, right? I think it's significant. It's a man who is impregnated.
Yeah. I mean, it's a blurring of conventional lines of not only of gender, but also conventional lines of biological sex.
Right.
And
Cain's child, they call it after its, Ash calls.
And so it rips out of the torso. We see that again. That happens again in this movie. But there's also, I think one thing that's different here, I do think it's worth thinking about. There's a kind of conservatism here about sex and gender in Alien Romulus. When we think about the character she's pregnant, right? And that's all we really know about her. She's one of the, 5 or 6 friends.
Could you not, as soon as you knew she was pregnant, could you not see exactly what was going to happen?
You could see what was going to happen, but think about the characterization. So she's a single, she's not married, right? She does not appear to have, and when asked about who the father is, she makes it clear that the father is not going to be a part of raising a child. And so this is and so what ends up happening, right? So she's portrayed. So this feeds into this kind of notion of, of carrying a child, right? Feeds in a non-nuclear family sort of way, feeds into longstanding tropes about sexual licentiousness, about poor decision-making, about an inability to discipline one's self. And so she's already a character who's carrying the weight of that baggage. And then, well, who actually is responsible for creating the xenoform human hybrid? Well, it's her, right? She has been told, or at least has been warned, that like this technology that, you inject the xenoform DNA or something into human body, that this is likely not a good idea, right? It's dangerous. It should be studied more. And she does it without apparently a second thought. She goes ahead and contaminates herself. And so it's a reprise in a lot of ways of this lack of discipline, poor decision-making that, would have gotten her into a position where she was carrying a child without a partner.
Yeah.
In the first place.
Okay.
So there's a kind of conservatism, it seems to me, that is infusing conservative vision of, women's reproduction, of the possibility of having a family, right? That kind of works its way in subliminally in this movie, or subterraneously, I should say, into this movie.
Yeah, it's a really interesting line of analysis. I do think this is the area of the movie that's most interesting to me, and that I think they do a couple of the things that I think are the best homages, or the best use of references to the original movies. For me, the best scene in the movie, and the one with most critical force, is I think it was about kind of halfway through, and one of the dudes who there were several that I found it difficult to distinguish both of them. They're just generic. I mean, sorry, idiots. lots of shouting,
One
lots
was
of
more rash than the other.
yeah, lots of but they were both kind of gung ho, and the other one was not quite as rash because he was the partner of the heroine, right? Or did I misunderstand what was going on there? Anyway, but he was still.
I think they hint at something there, but it's never.
Yeah, he was still kind of broy and, very sort of stereotypical of that kind of character. But one of them, they have this kind of cattle prod thing. It's kind of, it's a massive sort of thing. And they stumble upon a part of the aliens have been building kind of parts of the hive. And they're in this corridor and they look up and they stumble across. And it's very in line with the phallic and vaginal imagery that H.R. Geiger brought to the Alien franchise, and it was all over Alien and Aliens. And this guy has this big, hard stick that he's very proud of, and he loves prodding things with it. And he decides he's going to prod it into this alien thing that has the lips. I mean, it's unmistakable, right? It's clearly a vaginal orifice. And he takes great pleasure of shoving the giant stick up there, and it does it electrocutes it, and he's really like excited and pleased at having what he thinks has killed the alien. Yeah. Whereupon a giant kind of phallic, but also like teeth, type thing appears, impales him, and a giant monster comes out of the orifice that he's just penetrated with his. It's not the first time that kind of sequence of events or story has been told, but it was actually, I think, quite a nicely accomplished. That was an appropriate way for him to meet his fate, I thought.
Yeah, and again, a behavior that is freighted with all kinds of long-term baggage. I mean, what has he done here? He's behaved in, to take the analogy, the metaphor, I suppose, to where it really should go. He has behaved in a licentious sexual manner. He has gone out and he has, penetrated something that he had no business penetrating with his phallus that he finds that was not actually necessary, right?
It wasn't doing anything.
It wasn't doing anything. It did not appear to be an obvious threat, at least in that moment. And so, he's significantly punished in the same way that later our character who gives birth to the hybrid will be. I mean, she is, punished literally by her own creation.
But this is the other thing that I thought was quite interesting. I should put my cards on the table. I didn't like that kind of final beast, and it was a hybrid of a human, a xenomorph, and I'm pretty sure, and you might not know this because you haven't seen kind of Prometheus and Ridley Scott's prequels to Alien. But you may remember from Alien what's called the space jockey. It's the giant kind of pilot of the alien ship. That had itself been attacked by a chest burster, and that they become known as the engineers or the space jockeys. And there's a whole thing in the prequels, and they kind of look like that creature as well. So it's clearly like a space jockey alien human hybrid. Which again, it's like. Yeah, it speaks to me of someone who watched those movies, wrote down ideas they liked, and didn't actually bother to keep the mythology separate and just kind of like, they would be cool if we combined those three things and put them together. What I did think was a nice moment, though, was, as I understood it, that baby, that is almost instantly like, 10 feet tall. But that baby smells its mother, and doesn't he try to feed from her? Doesn't he try to get milk from her breast? Is that what you?
It was very unclear. I thought that was what was going to happen, but then it seems like he's just devouring her.
He just becomes then he becomes a space vampire, right? Which is much less interesting.
I mean, there is a line. I mean, there is a line of thinking that this is what breastfeeding babies do, is that they devour the mother.
Right. Yeah, but if he was in fact trying to...
a literal version of that.
Yes, if he was in fact trying to breastfeed from his mother, that would have been appropriate for who he was. But it would have been a nice little commentary. Yeah. But I didn't like that. That felt to me like it's like video game logic, right? We need a final big boss to...
Well, that was, again, that's... the horror-like elements of it as well.
Sure.
Right? That it's never actually over, right? And then there are elements even then, like it seems like the hybrid's dead, but you know that he's not. There's going to be one final, grabbing onto the the ankle of our heroine as she's trying to escape. These were the kinds of elements that struck me as pretty predictable.
Right. I have one more theme, which is genre. And sort of famously, you watch Alien, and it's it's paradigmatic in science fiction because it marries science fiction with horror, which then becomes a very significant. There is this whole line of thought that science fiction is very hard to put on film, and until Alien, the only one that had managed it was 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then you had Alien, and that managed putting science fiction on film as opposed to in literature by essentially making a horror movie. Yeah. And then a couple of years later, you have Blade Runner, which manages it by making a noir detective movie, and that's the line of thought. So it was significant that Alien sort of inaugurates the sci-fi horror hybrid. Yeah. And then the franchise switches genre completely to become a film. Yeah, action like military science fiction in Aliens. So that kind of facility with genre is a hallmark of the franchise. What genre are we putting Alien Romulus in?
That one, sci-fi horror.
Okay,
is where I would put it.
I would modify that slightly, and this may be I'm sure I sound like a sort of crotchety old man, but if the shoe fits, that I would put it in teen horror. Is that?
I'm not sure.
Harsh or reductive, restrictive?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think the horror genre is very much pitched at teens.
I think there's a metabolism to teen horror that isn't necessarily in all horror. I think you can have a more cerebral, slow, insidious horror. Yeah, Alien is most of the maybe what I'm objecting to is just jump scares. Maybe that's actually what I'm talking about. And there's not a lot of. This thing moves really, really quickly in a way that I associate with contemporary horrors. Maybe that's what I mean, rather than teen horror. There's a jump scare. There has to be one every few minutes, and things have to move at this kind of pace. The other thing that bothered me that I think moved it out of cerebral horror into a different category, just total overkill in terms of why are there a million facehuggers? Well, Alien managed with one facehugger and one xenomorph to make one of the most terrifying movies ever. Why do we need 1,000 of them?
There's an element of suspense versus horror.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking.
What the earlier Alien movies do is they're pretty suspenseful.
Yeah.
Right. And it feeds into your concern about taking your time. Right, and building scenes and allowing kind of natural forms of suspense to build.
Right.
There's not a lot of that in this movie. Right. It's a lot of I really noticed it when I was watching Aliens earlier. I mean, they really let the suspense build over the course of multiple scenes and really over the course of first act and a half before we really get the introduction of the aliens. Here, you're right. It's definitely moving much more quickly.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this as we finish up our reaction. So it's typically the case that in the American cinema, when we get movies about aliens, the aliens are generally stand-ins for different kinds of human or national or cultural fears or nightmares and the like. Who are the aliens standing in for in Alien Romulus?
In Alien Romulus, I don't know. I mean, I'd always read the xenomorph in the franchise I'd always thought was standing in for the kind of rapacious effects of capitalism, right? And that kind of violation of the human body and the loss of bodily autonomy was a literalization of the violation of autonomy in extremely exploitative capitalist systems. But for the aliens to be standing in for anything requires you to have a faith that the writer and the director are in control of whatever that metaphor is. And again, I don't mean to sound too harsh. I'm comparing this movie to two great paradigmatic movies. So if what I'm saying sounds harsh, that's because that's the comparison point. I was not convinced that the aliens were other than the creatures in need of being, that are there to kind of jump out or scare you or needed to be run away from or shot in the face. Did you think there was a greater metaphorical thing going on? Well, I mean, the greater metaphorical things are the things that were established earlier in the franchise. So the movie gets the benefit of those almost by accident, by importing a lot of the premises and, Weyland-Yutani and so forth. Do you think it was doing anything
Well, I think
than that. Or
I think
beyond
if
that?
we consider their presence in the context of this story in particular, when do they appear? Well, they appeared basically to frustrate and or deny the dreams of freedom.
Okay.
And so, what, and they seem to have some unclear connection to the corporation.
Yeah.
And so it could be a way, maybe this is the goon squad, right? These are the strike breakers of lore. These are the people that they hire in to beat up on and to frustrate the dreams of workers.
Okay. While you were speaking, I thought of what I think they're standing for, and it could be that that could be correct. I think they're the parents of these teenagers, right? There are no parents actually present. The movie says Rain's parents were killed, and here they are. They're frustrating these teenagers. They found a haunted house to go explore. And they got kind of frustrated. That was supposed to be fun and so forth. They wouldn't even make money. And then they were going to go on holiday. They were going to go to Mykonos and get drunk and go to raves and do stuff. And the parents said no. Similarly here, they needed the travel pass. They needed the cryo thing. And the parents turned up and ruined all the fun. It's just this time they happened to do it in the form of massive, great big xenomorphs.
Well, you have children. You have children who are explicitly trying to reject their filial history. They're explicitly trying to escape the fates of their parents.
Right.
And so maybe, the parental authority comes back here to ensure that they either will not, or if they persist, they will die. So
this is a teen movie. That's been my point, maybe. And that's great, right? Like, not every movie is made for every genre and every demographic, and I don't mean anything derogatory by that, but I think it struck me in the way it did because I'm not, contrary to appearances, I'm not 18. On that bombshell, I think we should say goodbye.
Yeah.